lesson, we're going to look at some of the more common elements that are going to be available within HTML. So if I'm writing out something like hello world, so I have something like this where I've got several lines. I've got hello world, this is my new page, do you like it? So I want to render this out within this type of structure actually into my HTML page. But when I go over to HTML and I refresh it, I see that it places it all on one line. So I'm going to actually make this bigger so we can see it a little bit better. But we see that everything is placed on one line, and it doesn't exactly look like I've laid it out here within my HTML. And this is one of the things to make note of when you are creating HTML pages, that white space, so it doesn't matter if I have a ton of white space and I refresh it, nothing changes. And the reason for that is that all of this white space, it's simply rendered out as one space. So even though we're placing it on a new line, all of this line return, this is not actually being interpreted by the browser, because these are going to be two different ways of viewing whatever output we've got here. So one is within the HTML file itself, and without any additional structure in here, the browser actually doesn't know how you want it rendered out. So you could literally have a ton of spacing, a ton of line returns, and you could have something like this and go out and refresh it and see that it actually nothing looks like the way that you've set it up here within your structure. And this is why we need to have HTML elements or HTML tags that we need to use in order to help better structure our web page and our content. So if we want this to look exactly like we've placed it here on the page, we have to provide those proper instructions for the web page or for the browser in order to be able to render this out. So if we want hello world maybe here at the top, we have to set paragraphs. And now paragraphs are going to work the same way as our body tags. Any content within here, this is going to be considered a new paragraph. And by default, when the browser renders out a paragraph, it knows that, okay, this is a paragraph, and what happens after a paragraph? We start a brand new line. And that's what the browser knows, and knows how to interpret that HTML code starting a brand new line. So we have all of this white space here that is actually not being read and rendered through the browser. And if we do want to have all of this additional structure, we need to indicate that this is what we want to happen on our page. So I'm going to just simply remove out some of this, because again, this is for readability as well. So you want to be able to make it readable when you're writing code, and also opening and closing these tags. So make sure that you don't have any overlapping tags as well. So if you have something like this, what this is going to do is this is going to take the do and place it on a new paragraph, and it's going to nest this new paragraph within the bigger paragraph. So essentially you're going to end up with these four sets of lines where you've got paragraphs. So 1, 2, and 3, but this is actually going to be 4 because the hello world is 1. This is a new paragraph, and then we're starting a new paragraph again with do. We're closing off the paragraph, and you like it comes into this initial paragraph, but because we've got a paragraph in between, it provides that spacing that returns. So even though this is written out as 3 paragraphs, we kind of see 4 being displayed here. And a lot of times you've got to make sure that when you are nesting content within other content, that this is actually what you want it to look like. And so going back out here, now I've got my 3 separate paragraphs. And along with file structure, we also have, so what if we wanted a new line, but we don't necessarily want to have a new paragraph? So when we've written out a bunch of content and I want to place "do you like it" right underneath the page, I don't want to have all of this default spacing in here. And the way to do that is to do that with line breaks. Now line breaks are going to be different than all of these other tags that we've been looking at, because line breaks don't contain any content in between them. So if I wanted to place a simple line break here, which is indicated by BR, and I go out and I refresh it, we see that this line break doesn't take a brand new paragraph, but although it starts with a new line, it doesn't necessarily have that same pre-built or styling as the paragraphs do. So this is the way that you can set content directly underneath without starting a new paragraph. And the interesting thing about line breaks is they're self-closing, because this is just going to be as when the browser is rendering out an instruction for the browser to structure the page within this way. So with paragraphs, it's expecting content in between, because our paragraph does contain content, but the line break is different, because this is just a simple instruction. When it's reading through here, it gets to the end of page here, it says, okay, line break. So it automatically knows that it's going to start a new line, and then it finishes off the rest of the paragraph information and closes paragraph. So if I put something underneath here, or if I do something underneath, even if I don't do a new paragraph, if I just do "hello world," we can see that it automatically adds all of that spacing that the paragraphs have. So they have some additional spacing at top and bottom, and it's automatically added in because these two are paragraphs. This one isn't, but this one is just taking that spacing because previously there's a closing paragraph. So that's how we work with paragraphs and creating or telling the browser how we want the content to be output. And as opposed to just having a bunch of content and visually structuring it here within the file, we have to indicate to the browser what we want it to look like.